I spent 17 years working wildlife survey contracts across the Pacific Northwest, but the Wendigo Ridge assignment in northern Idaho felt wrong from the moment I accepted it. That should have been enough. That gut instinct that keeps you alive in the backcountry, I ignored it because the pay was exceptional and the Forest Service seemed desperate to get boots on the ground before winter set in. My name is Garrett Douglas, and I led a 4-person team tasked with surveying elk populations and predator activity across 40 square miles of remote wilderness. The area had seen a spike in unexplained livestock deaths on the ranches bordering national forest land, and the locals were demanding answers. Standard work, or so I thought. My crew consisted of Javier Mendoza, a wildlife biologist from New Mexico with 8 years of field experience; Nora Sullivan, a younger researcher fresh from graduate studies at Montana State; and Cole Riley, our camp coordinator who'd worked logging operations throughout the region for over a decade. All capable people, all experienced enough to know the woods. We established base camp at an old fire lookout station, a 2-story structure with decent bones despite being abandoned for 20 years. The Forest Service had grudgingly provided satellite phones. Reception was non-existent otherwise, and Cole spent the first day reinforcing the perimeter fence and securing food storage. The area had significant bear activity, according to the briefing documents, though the ranchers told a different story. "Ain't bears doing this," said an old rancher named Woodrow Tillman when we stopped at his property on the drive-in. He'd lost 12 head of cattle over the summer. "Bears don't stack rocks in patterns, don't break 20-foot pine trees in half and jam them into the ground like fence posts, and they sure as hell don't scream like women getting murdered." I'd nodded politely. Javier had asked about Bigfoot sightings. Apparently, Wendigo Ridge had a reputation among cryptid enthusiasts, complete with blurry photographs and dubious footprint casts posted across the internet. The rancher had gone quiet, stared at us for a long moment, then said, "Semequis. That's what the Nez Perce called them. Stick to the daylight, stay together, and don't go near the bone trees." When I asked what bone trees were, he'd simply pointed north toward the ridge and told us we'd know them when we saw them. Our first 3 days passed productively. We documented elk herds, cataloged scat samples, and set up trail cameras along game trails and water sources. The forest itself was magnificent. Old-growth Douglas fir and western red cedar, some specimens easily 300 years old, with undergrowth so dense that visibility dropped to 20 feet in places. The kind of wilderness that made you feel small and appropriately humbled. On the 4th morning, Nora reviewed footage from the trail cameras we'd positioned near a mineral lick. She called me over to her laptop, her face drained of color. "Garrett, you need to see this." The timestamp read 2:47 a.m. The infrared footage showed the mineral lick clearly, illuminated in ghostly gray tones. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then, at the edge of frame, something massive stepped into view. It walked upright. That was the first detail my brain processed. Bipedal locomotion, but the proportions were wrong. Too much muscle mass through the shoulders and chest, arms that hung too long, a body that radiated raw power. The creature stood at least 8 feet tall, covered in dark hair that caught the infrared in strange ways, creating an almost shimmering effect. But it was the face that made my throat constrict. Even in the limited resolution, even with the creature in profile, I could see features that shouldn't exist. The heavy brow ridge, the flat nose, the jaw that jutted forward, simultaneously human enough to trigger recognition and alien enough to violate every expectation. The creature knelt at the mineral lick, massive hands cupping water to its mouth. It drank for perhaps 30 seconds, then froze. Its head swiveled directly toward the camera, and for one eternal moment, those eyes reflected the infrared illumination like twin coins floating in darkness. Then it was gone. Not fleeing, simply vanishing back into the forest with impossible silence for something so large. "Jesus Christ," Cole whispered. He'd come to watch over our shoulders. "That's real. That's actually real." Javier was already pulling up footage from our other cameras. We found similar activity on 3 more units. Massive bipedal figures moving through the forest with clear purpose and unsettling grace. On one camera, we captured something even more disturbing. 2 of the creatures, both enormous, standing together near a game trail. They appeared to be communicating, one making gestures with its hands while the other watched. Complex communication, intentional and deliberate. "We need to report this," Nora said, her voice trembling with excitement and something else, a note of fear she was trying to suppress. "This is documentation of an unknown species. This is Bigfoot," I said quietly. The word felt strange in my mouth, loaded with decades of ridicule and hoax allegations. This is what all those stories were about. The Patterson-Gimlin film, the BFRO reports, the indigenous legends. It's all real. Cole stood abruptly, walking to the window. "I've logged these mountains for 15 years, heard stories my whole life, saw things I couldn't explain, trees broken in ways that made no sense, found tracks that scared the shit out of me, heard sounds that made grown men refuse to work certain sections. We all knew. On some level, every person who works out here knows something's watching." That night, something threw rocks at our station. Not pebbles, stones the size of softballs that struck the walls with enough force to crack the aging timbers. The impacts came from multiple directions, too coordinated to be random. Between the strikes, we heard vocalizations, deep, resonant howls that seemed to vibrate through the building's structure, followed by high-pitched screams that raised every hair on my body. We huddled inside with lights blazing, weapons ready, though what good a rifle would do against something that massive remained an open question. The assault continued for 40 minutes, then stopped as abruptly as it began. In the morning, we found the evidence. Rocks scattered around the perimeter, some weighing 30 or 40 pounds, thrown with enough velocity to crater the impact points. But more disturbing were the trees. 3 substantial pines near our clearing had been broken off 20 feet up. The massive trunks snapped like kindling and jammed into the ground in a triangular pattern around our station. That's when I found the bone tree the rancher had mentioned. 50 yards into the forest, a dead cedar stood wrapped in arrangements. Animal skulls, elk, deer, bear, positioned at precise intervals up the trunk. Bones threaded through branches. And suspended from the highest limb, hanging by braided sinew, was a message. Rocks, stacked and balanced in an impossible formation that spelled out, in rough but unmistakable letters, "Go." My hands went numb. Javier made a sound like he'd been punched in the stomach. Nora simply stared, her scientific worldview visibly fracturing. "They can write," Cole said flatly. "They understand us. They know we can read. And they're telling us to leave." That's when the first howl erupted from the ridge above us, closer than anything we'd heard before, filled with such rage and warning that every instinct in my body screamed to run. We didn't leave. God help us, we didn't leave. That was our first mistake. We should have packed immediately. Instead, Javier insisted we document everything, the rock message, the bone tree, the trail camera footage, arguing this was the discovery of the century and we had a scientific obligation. Nora agreed, though I noticed her hand shook as she photographed the bone arrangements. Cole and I exchanged a long look that needed no words. We both knew better, but we didn't override them. That's on me. Leadership means making hard calls, and I failed. The second bone tree appeared that afternoon. We found it while retrieving camera equipment from the Eastern Survey section, this one more elaborate than the first. The skulls were fresher, arranged in what almost looked like a family grouping, a large elk skull at the center, smaller deer skulls positioned around it. But what stopped me cold was the message spelled out in rocks at the tree's base, each stone carefully placed. "You not listen." 4 words, grammatically simple, but structurally correct. These creatures hadn't just mimicked human writing. They understood language construction, subject-verb relationships, basic syntax. The implications made my mouth go dry. "It's addressing us directly," Nora whispered, kneeling to photograph the stones. "Present tense conjugation, second-person pronoun. This isn't random symbol arrangement. This is language comprehension." Javier was already setting up a video camera on a tripod, documenting the scene from multiple angles. "We need audio recordings. If they can write, they might vocalize with linguistic structures. We should set up microphones across the survey area." A branch snapped somewhere in the dense undergrowth to our north. We all froze. The forest had gone completely silent. No birds, no small animals, nothing but the whisper of wind through the canopy. Then came the smell. It hit like a physical wall, rotten meat mixed with musk so concentrated it triggered my gag reflex. The odor came from upwind, which meant whatever produced it wanted us to smell it. Warning scent. Territorial marker. A message as clear as the rocks spelled out before us. "Back to camp," I said quietly, reaching for the rifle slung over my shoulder. "Now, slowly. Don't run." We moved in a tight group, backs together, each of us watching a different direction. The forest pressed in around us, suddenly claustrophobic despite the massive trees. 50 yards from the bone tree, I heard it. Footfalls pacing us through the undergrowth, heavy and deliberate. Not trying to hide, just letting us know it was there. When we broke into the clearing around our station, I glanced back. For just a moment, I saw it clearly. A massive figure standing in the shadow of an ancient cedar, easily 9 feet tall, watching us with eyes that caught the afternoon light. It didn't move, didn't vocalize, just observed with an intelligence that felt absolutely wrong. Then it raised one hand, enormous, disproportionate, but undeniably hand-like, and pointed at us. The gesture was unmistakable, specific. "You." Inside the station, Cole immediately began reinforcing the doors and windows, while Javier and Nora downloaded all the camera footage to our backup drives. I got the satellite phone and called our Forest Service contact, a regional coordinator named Patricia Wolf. "We have a situation," I said, keeping my voice level. "Multiple sightings of large bipedal creatures demonstrating advanced intelligence. We've documented evidence of written communication." "Mr. Douglas, I'm going to stop you there," Wolf interrupted. "Are you reporting dangerous bear activity?" "No. Listen to me. These are not bears. We have video footage of—" "Mr. Douglas, the contract is very clear about reporting protocols. If you're experiencing dangerous wildlife encounters, we can extract you tomorrow morning. Otherwise, your team is expected to complete the survey work. Are you requesting emergency extraction for bear activity?" The tone made it clear. She knew exactly what we'd found, and she was offering us one chance to accept the official story and leave. I looked at my team, Javier shaking his head no, Nora frantically organizing evidence files, Cole watching me with grim understanding. "We'll complete the contract," I heard myself say. "Excellent. Regular check-in tomorrow at 9 a.m. She disconnected. "They know," Cole said flatly. "The Forest Service knows what's out here. That's why the pay was so good. That's why they sent us." That night, we reviewed every frame of trail camera footage. What we found was staggering. The creatures appeared on 17 different cameras across our survey area, always at night, always moving with purpose. We identified at least 7 distinct individuals based on size and build differences, likely a family group or small clan. But the most disturbing footage came from camera 12, positioned near a stream crossing. The timestamp read 3:14 a.m. 2 of the creatures stood in the shallow water, and they were clearly communicating. One would make a series of gestures, pointing, sweeping arm movements, tapping its own chest, while the other watched and responded with different gestures. This went on for over 4 minutes. Signed language. complex information exchange. Then they both turned and looked directly at the camera. They'd known it was there the whole time. One of the creatures stepped forward, bent down, and stared into the lens for a long moment. Even through the infrared distortion, I could see the intelligence in those eyes, the calculation. It reached out one massive hand and carefully removed the camera from its mounting bracket. The footage showed a dizzying moment of movement, then went black as the creature presumably destroyed the unit. "They're studying us," Nora said, her earlier excitement now edged with real fear. "Just like we're studying them, but they're better at it." At 11:47 p.m., the wood knocking started. Sharp, resonant impacts of wood on wood coming from at least 3 different locations around our camp. The pattern was deliberate. 3 knocks from the north, answered by 2 from the west, then 4 from the east. Communication. Triangulation. They were coordinating positions around us. Cole and I took watch shifts while the others tried to sleep. During my shift around 2 a.m., I heard movement on the roof. Heavy, deliberate footsteps directly above my head. Something massive was up there, and the ancient timbers creaked under its weight. I aimed my flashlight at the ceiling, watching dust filter down from between the boards. Then came the voice. Not a howl, not an animal vocalization. A voice, deep, guttural, wrong in ways that made my skin crawl, but unmistakably attempting human speech. Garrett. My name, distorted and mispronounced, like someone speaking around a mouthful of marbles, but definitely my name. The creature on the roof knew my name, had learned it from listening to us. Garrett. Leave. 3 syllables, subject and verb. A direct command delivered in my own language. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Every rational thought fractured against the reality of what I'd just heard. These things didn't just understand human language, they could speak it. The footsteps moved across the roof, then silence. I stood frozen, rifle gripped so tight my hands ached, waiting for whatever would come next. At dawn, we found the 3rd message. This one was scratched into the dirt of our clearing in letters 3 feet high, made by something with claws or fingers strong enough to gouge deep furrows in the hard-packed earth. Last warning. But it was the addition that made Javier actually stumble backward. A crude drawing scratched into the dirt beside the words. 4 stick figures. Next to them, 1 stick figure lying down. A pictogram so simple a child could understand it. Stay, and one of you dies. We held an emergency meeting. Nora advocated for immediate evacuation. The scientific evidence was already overwhelming, and the threat was explicit. Javier wanted to stay just 1 more day, convinced we could establish communication protocols. Cole and I wanted to leave immediately, though Cole insisted on destroying all the bone trees first, calling it returning the threat. We were still arguing when the screaming started. Not human screaming, though it was close enough to freeze my blood. Multiple voices coming from the forest on all sides, shrieking in harmonized rage that built and built until it felt like the sound was coming from inside my skull. The station's windows vibrated, dust fell from the ceiling. The sheer volume was physically painful. Then it stopped, and the silence that followed was worse. Cole walked to the window, looked out, and went pale. Jesus Christ, they're all around us. I joined him and felt my stomach drop. The forest edge, maybe 50 yards from our station, ringed with massive figures standing perfectly still between the trees. I counted 9. 9 of these things, each one enormous and terrifying, forming a complete circle around our position. As we watched, they all took 1 synchronized step forward, then stopped, then another step, moving in unison, closing the circle. Gear up, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. We're leaving. Now. But when I tried the door, it wouldn't budge. Something heavy had been placed against it from outside. I could feel the resistance, the immovable weight. Every door, every window, We'd been sealed inside while we slept. We were trapped, surrounded, and they wanted us to know it. That's when I understood. This wasn't territorial defense. This wasn't warning away intruders. This was a hunt, and we were the prey. They'd been studying us, learning our language, understanding our weaknesses. And now they were ready to teach us a lesson about our place in the food chain. The creatures held their positions as dawn broke fully, 9 massive figures stationed around our perimeter like sentries. They didn't move, didn't vocalize, just watched with patience. That was somehow more terrifying than any aggressive display. Cole and I worked frantically to clear the doors. Someone had stacked logs, rocks, and debris against every exit point during the night. They'd built our prison while we slept inside. "How did we not hear this?" Nora kept repeating, her voice climbing toward panic. How did they move that much material in complete silence? Because they'd wanted us to sleep, I realized. The night before had been the violence, the screaming, the wood knocking, the voice from the roof. Psychological assault designed to exhaust us. Then, when we'd finally collapsed from fear and adrenaline crash, they'd worked in perfect silence. Intelligent strategy. Coordinated planning. We were dealing with apex predators who could think. It took us 40 minutes to clear the main door enough to squeeze through. I went first, rifle ready, scanning the tree line. The creatures had withdrawn. I could see massive footprints leading into the forest, but the circle had broken. For now. "Satellite phone," I said. "We call for immediate extraction. Contract be damned." But when Nora retrieved the phone from its charging station, she made a small, broken sound. The antenna had been torn completely off, the cable severed with precision. Our radio equipment, stored in the locked supply shed, was similarly destroyed. Every cord cut, every antenna snapped. Someone or something had reached through the ventilation gaps and systematically disabled our communications. "They know what these things do," Javier said quietly. He stood holding the ruined phone, his earlier scientific enthusiasm completely extinguished. "They understand technology well enough to know what to destroy." Cole was already loading his truck with emergency supplies. "Nearest town is 43 miles down a logging road that hasn't seen maintenance in 5 years. If we leave now, stay together, we can be out by afternoon." "Agreed," I said. "Everyone packs essential gear only. We move." The howl erupted from the ridge directly above us, so close I could hear the intake of breath before the sound came. It was answered immediately by another howl from the west, then the south, then the north. Quadraphonic communication, the sources moving as they called. They were coordinating again, repositioning around us. We loaded into Cole's F-250 in under 3 minutes, 4 people crammed into the cab with rifles and supplies. Cole hit the ignition, and the engine turned over once, twice, then made a grinding sound and died. "No," he whispered, trying again. Same result. He popped the hood and we all saw it immediately. The battery cables had been torn out, and something had methodically destroyed the starter motor with what looked like precise strikes from a heavy rock. The damage was surgical. They'd known exactly which components would disable the vehicle. "The other trucks," Nora said, pointing to our 2 smaller survey vehicles parked near the equipment shed. But even from a distance, I could see the flattened tires, the smashed windshields, the hood standing open. We were on foot, 43 miles from help, surrounded by creatures that could outrun us, outthink us, and knew this terrain perfectly. "We fortify the station," I decided. "Make it through the day, travel at night." "No." Cole's voice was flat, certain. "That's what they want. They've corralled us here, taken away the vehicles, cut communications. This is their killing ground now. We have to move on foot, stay together, stay armed, and get to that logging road. Other crews use it. We might flag down help." He was right. Staying here meant waiting for them to breach our walls. But 43 miles through dense forest, exhausted, terrified, with at least 9 of those things hunting us? The decision was made for us when something massive struck the station's back wall. The entire structure shuddered, timbers cracking under the impact. Another strike followed, then another. They were testing the walls, learning their strength. "Move!" I shouted. "South toward the logging road. Stay tight, weapons ready." We ran. The forest closed around us immediately, visibility dropping to 20 feet in the dense undergrowth. I took point with Cole behind me, Nora and Javier in the middle. Every shadow could hide something massive. Every sound made us spin with rifles raised. The creatures didn't follow directly. Instead, I kept hearing them parallel to our path, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, pacing us, hurting us. After 2 hours of brutal hiking through terrain that seemed designed to impede human movement, we stopped in a small clearing to catch our breath. That's when Javier noticed the trees. "Garrett," he said, pointing with a shaking hand. "Look at the breaks." All around the clearing, saplings had been snapped at chest height, bent and twisted into barriers that channeled movement in specific directions. This wasn't random damage, it was constructed. They'd modified the forest itself, creating corridors that would funnel us exactly where they wanted. "We're in their maze," Cole said, scanning the tree line with his rifle. "They've been preparing this." A branch snapped behind us. We spun as one, and I saw it clearly. A creature standing 30 yards away between two massive cedars. It was smaller than the others I'd seen, maybe 7 feet tall, but still impossibly muscled. And it was watching Javier specifically, head tilted in what looked disturbingly like curiosity. "Don't move," I whispered. The creature took one step forward, another. It moved with eerie silence for something so large, each footfall placed with precision. 10 yards away now, close enough that I could see details. The way its hair grew in patterns across its body, the fingers that were too long but clearly possessed an opposable thumb, the face that was neither human nor ape, but somewhere in the horrifying middle. It made a sound, a low, rumbling vocalization that might have been communication, or might have been something else. Then it spoke. Javier. Javier's name, pronounced badly, but unmistakably his name. Javier made a small, terrified sound. The creature tilted its head the other way, studying him. Then it raised one massive hand and gestured. "Come here." "Run!" I shouted, firing a warning shot over the creature's head. The forest exploded into motion. The creature before us didn't flinch at the gunshot, just reached out with impossible speed and grabbed Javier by the jacket, yanking him forward like he weighed nothing. Javier screamed, fumbling for the pistol at his belt. I fired again, this time aiming for the creature's torso. The shot was true. I saw the impact, saw hair and flesh fly. The creature roared, a sound that felt like it could tear molecules apart, but it didn't release Javier. Instead, it turned and ran, carrying him into the forest. Cole and I gave chase, crashing through undergrowth, firing repeatedly. I caught glimpses. The creature's broad back, Javier struggling in its grip, other massive figures moving parallel through the trees. Then the forest grew too dense, the terrain too steep, and they were gone. Javier's screaming cut off suddenly. The silence that followed told us everything. Nora collapsed, sobbing. Cole just stared into the forest, rifle still raised, breathing hard. I felt nothing. My brain had shut down emotion to keep functioning, entering a cold calculus of survival. "We keep moving," I said. "The logging road. That's our only chance." But as we stumbled forward, I saw fresh scratches on a tree trunk, letters gouged deep into the bark. 2 more. They were counting. They'd taken Javier, and they were promising they'd take 2 more before this ended. It wasn't random violence. It was systematic elimination, carried out with mathematical precision. We found Javier's body 3 hours later. They'd left him on the trail ahead of us, positioned carefully where we couldn't miss it. I won't describe what they'd done. Some images can't be unremembered, but it was clear they'd spent time with him after they'd taken him. Time to experiment, to explore human anatomy, to understand how we broke. His journal was placed on his chest, open to the last page. New words had been added in crude, scratched lettering that hadn't been made by human hands. He learn, you learn, all learn. Nora vomited. Cole's face went gray as old paper. I just stood there, staring at those words, understanding finally what we were dealing with. They weren't just hunting us. They were teaching us, demonstrating their superiority, their intelligence, their complete control over every aspect of this situation. We were subjects in their lesson about the natural order, a lesson that would end with all of us dead. The sun was setting, and we were still 20 miles from the logging road. Night was coming, and in the darkness, they would have every advantage. Behind us, from the ridge we descended, came a sound, deep, triumphant howling that echoed across the valley. Victory call. They'd taken one of us, and now they were celebrating. Then, closer than the howling, came words spoken in that same guttural, wrong voice. Nora, cool, carrot. They knew all our names now, and they were coming for the rest of us. We moved through the dying light like prey animals, every nerve ending screaming danger. The creatures paced us through the forest, never quite visible but always present. I'd catch movement in my peripheral vision, massive shapes gliding between trees. Cole would spin at sounds from the rear. Nora walked in a state of shock, following our movement mechanically while her mind remained back with Javier's destroyed body. When full darkness fell, we activated our headlamps. We had no choice. The terrain was too treacherous for blind travel, but the lights announced our position like beacons. Within minutes, the wood knocking started, triangulating around us from at least 4 positions. They were calling in the others, coordinating for a coordinated assault. There, Cole hissed, pointing at a rocky outcrop ahead. Defensible position. We make a stand. We scrambled up the rocks and found a natural depression where 3 massive boulders formed a crude shelter. Backs protected, limited approaches, clear sight lines. The best we could hope for. Cole and I positioned ourselves at the 2 access points while Nora huddled behind us, breathing in shallow gasps. The wood knocking stopped. Silence pressed in, broken only by our ragged breathing and the distant sound of water running somewhere in the darkness. My headlamp beam cut through the night, illuminating a cone of forest that looked suddenly alien and hostile. Then the psychological warfare began. Nora, came that impossible voice from the darkness ahead. Nora, come. Don't respond, I whispered. Don't move. Please, the voice continued, the word grotesquely mispronounced but clear. Help, Nora, help. It was mimicking distress, trying to draw her out with a false cry for help. The manipulation was sophisticated, almost human in its cruelty. Another voice joined from a different direction. Cool, father. Cole stiffened beside me. My father died 15 years ago, he said quietly. How do they know his name? They couldn't know. They were guessing, using words we'd said, mixing them randomly to provoke reaction. But the effect was still terrifying. These creatures using human speech as a weapon, verbal attacks designed to destabilize us before the physical assault. Garrett, the first voice called. Kill you. Slow. You watch. Direct threat now. The linguistic sophistication was increasing, like they were learning grammar in real time from hearing us speak. Subject, verb, object. Future tense. Adverbs modifying verbs. They were rapidly assembling functional language skills. A rock struck the boulder above my head, the crack of impact making all of us jump. Another rock hit left, then right. They were testing our response time, measuring our defensive capabilities, stress testing the position. "Light at 2 o'clock, Cole said, and I swung my beam right. For just a moment I caught a figure. Massive, covered in reddish-brown hair, face dominated by those terrible, intelligent eyes. It didn't flee from the light, just watched us, calculating. Then it raised both arms and smashed them together in a thunderous clap that echoed across the forest. The sound was answered by similar claps from multiple directions. Communication. "We're ready. Begin the assault." They came from 3 directions simultaneously. The first creature charged straight up the rocks, moving with terrifying speed despite its bulk. I fired point blank into its chest. The impact staggered it but didn't drop it. Cole's rifle barked twice, and the creature fell backward, roaring in pain and rage, but 2 more were already climbing from the flanks. I spun left and fired into a face that would haunt my nightmares forever. Features that were almost human twisted into a mask of murderous intent. The creature caught the bullet somewhere in the shoulder, screamed, but kept coming. Cole's rifle clicked empty. He dropped it and pulled his sidearm, firing repeatedly into the darkness where massive shapes moved and retreated. Nora was screaming, a continuous sound of pure terror. A massive hand reached over the boulder behind us, fingers groping for purchase. I shoved Nora aside and put 3 rounds into the arm. The hand withdrew with a howl of pain, but I could hear more of them circling, probing our defenses. "Magazine," Cole shouted. I fumbled for a spare mag, dropped it, found another. The delay cost us. One of the creatures, faster than the others, lunged over the right boulder in a single fluid motion. It landed in our defensive position, and I saw it clearly. A female, smaller than the males but still 7 feet of lethal muscle and rage. She grabbed Nora before any of us could react, yanking her backward. Nora's screaming reached a pitch that wasn't quite human. The creature paused, holding her up like a doll, studying her with those terrible eyes. Then it spoke, directly to Nora's face. "Scarred? Good." And it leaped backward off the rocks, carrying Nora into the darkness. Cole and I fired after them, rounds disappearing into blackness. The sound of Nora's screaming faded as the creature carried her into the forest, but we could still hear her for another 30 seconds. Then silence. Just Cole and me, alone in the dark, surrounded. "We can't help her," I said, the words tasting like poison. "If we leave this position, they'll take us both. We have to." "I know," Cole said. His voice was hollow, dead. "I know." We didn't have long to process. The creatures attacked again, this time more cautiously. They'd learned that our weapons could hurt them, so they used the terrain, approaching from multiple angles, forcing us to divide our attention. Rock throwing intensified, stones the size of grapefruits striking with enough force to crack bone if they connected. One massive boulder, it must have weighed 200 pounds, came sailing over our position and crashed into the space where we'd been standing seconds before. The impact sent shrapnel flying. Cole caught a piece across his face, blood pouring from a gash on his cheek. We were running out of ammunition, running out of time. Then the attack stopped. Just stopped. The silence stretched out, broken only by our panting breath and Cole's quiet swearing as he tried to staunch the bleeding. From the darkness ahead came Nora's voice. "Garrett, Cole, please help me. Please." Not the creature's distorted mimicry. Nora's actual voice, clear and desperate. "It's a trap," Cole said. "They're using her as bait." "I know." "Garrett," came the creature's voice, close enough that it must be right at the base of our rocky shelter. "She alive. Now. Come down. Save her. Maybe." They were offering terms. Surrender and possibly save Nora, or stay protected and listen to whatever they did to her. "Please," Nora called, her voice breaking. "Please don't leave me. Please." Cole looked at me. Even in the dim light, I could see tears on his face. "We can't," he said. "If we go down there, we all die. At least this way, 2 of us might." Nora's screaming started again. Not words this time, just raw agony. They were hurting her, making sure we heard, teaching us the cost of defiance. It went on for 5 minutes. 5 eternal minutes of Nora's suffering broadcast into the night, while Cole and I crouched in our shelter with fingers stuffed in our ears, trying to block out the sound. Trying to be cowards so we might survive. When it finally stopped, the silence was worse. "Nora dead," announced that terrible voice. "Learn cost. Cole next. Then Garrett. We patient." Dawn came with agonizing slowness. The creatures withdrew at first light. We could hear them retreating through the forest, wood knocking their locations to each other. They had all night to hunt. Daylight was our time, apparently. They were giving us a head start, making the game more interesting. We found Nora's body at the base of our rocky position. She'd been alive when they brought her here, left where we'd be forced to see her when we climbed down. The creatures had made sure we understood. They could have killed her instantly, but they'd chosen to make it slow. Educational. Her trail camera, the one she'd worn on her belt for documentation, was smashed beside her. But the memory card had been carefully removed and placed in her hand. They wanted us to have it, wanted us to see what they'd done in detail. I left the card there. Some knowledge destroys you. Cole and I didn't speak as we continued toward the logging road. What was there to say? We'd abandoned 2 people to save ourselves. We'd failed as leaders, as humans, as everything we thought we were. The logging road was still 12 miles ahead. We had no illusions about making it to safety. The creatures would attack again tonight. But we kept walking because stopping meant giving up. And some stubborn part of me refused to die kneeling. A tree ahead bore fresh scratches, words gouged into bark. "One more." Cole stopped, staring at the message. "They're keeping score," he said flatly, "like it's a game to them." "It is a game," I said. "We're just now realizing we're not the players. We're the pieces." That afternoon, as we scrambled up a ridge that would give us a view toward the logging road, Cole grabbed my arm. There. Smoke. A thin column of smoke rose maybe 4 miles ahead. Another crew, other people, possible rescue. We started moving faster, exhaustion temporarily forgotten. Hope is a terrible thing. It makes you careless. The wood knocking started again as the sun touched the horizon. They'd been tracking us all day, waiting for darkness, waiting for the right moment. "Run!" I shouted to Cole. "The smoke! If we can reach them!" Cole suddenly stumbled, went down hard. I turned back and saw the vine pulled taut across the trail, nearly invisible in the fading light. A trap. They'd set a trap. Before Cole could rise, they came out of the trees. 3 of them, moving with coordinated precision. The largest, it must have been the alpha male, easily 9 feet tall and massively built, walked directly toward Cole. I raised my rifle, knew I had maybe 6 shots left, knew it wouldn't be enough. "Go," Cole said, looking up at me. "Get to the smoke. Tell people. Make them believe." "Cole, go," he screamed. "One of us has to survive. One of us has to warn people. That's an order, Garrett. Run." The creatures had stopped, watching this exchange. They understood. They knew exactly what was happening, the impossible choice being made, and they were letting it play out, curious to see what we'd do. I ran. God forgive me, I ran. Behind me, I heard Cole's rifle firing, heard his shouting turn to screaming, heard those terrible voices speaking words in their broken English while they worked. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs gave out, until I couldn't hear Cole anymore. I ran toward the smoke and whatever lay beyond, carrying the knowledge that I'd left 3 people to die, carrying the knowledge that the creatures had let me go, that they could have taken me any time they wanted, that I'd been allowed to escape because they wanted a survivor. Someone to tell the story, someone to spread the fear. The smoke belonged to a geological survey crew, 3 people in a helicopter-accessible camp doing mineral core sampling. They found me collapsed 200 yards from their perimeter at dawn, dehydrated, incoherent, covered in blood that wasn't mine. They called for emergency extraction. A helicopter had me out within 4 hours. The hospital in Coeur d'Alene sedated me for 3 days. When I finally stabilized enough to speak, 2 Forest Service rangers and a sheriff's deputy were waiting in my room. I told them everything: the bone trees, the written messages, the speech, the systematic hunting. I told them about Javier, Nora, and Cole, about creatures that could think and plan and communicate in stolen human language. They listened with expressions that never changed. Professional, patient, completely unsurprised. When I finished, the lead ranger, Patricia Wolf, my original contact, leaned forward. "Mr. Douglas, you experienced a traumatic bear attack. Your team was killed by a rogue grizzly, possibly a mother protecting cubs. These attacks, while rare, do occur. The isolation and stress caused you to experience hallucinations, which is a documented response to extreme trauma." "I'm not hallucinating. There's evidence. The trail cameras, the documentation. The cameras were destroyed by wildlife, as often happens. We recovered what we could, but the footage shows nothing conclusive. Shadows, normal forest animals. You interpreted ambiguous data through a lens of extreme stress." "They could write. They spelled words with rocks. They spoke our names." The deputy cleared his throat. "Mr. Douglas, there were no rock formations found at your camp. No messages. The damage to the vehicles and equipment is consistent with bear activity. Your satellite phone malfunctioned due to equipment failure, not sabotage." I stared at them, understanding slowly crystallizing. "You cleaned it up. You went in there and removed all the evidence. Why?" "There's nothing to clean up," Wolf said evenly. "You suffered severe trauma. The deaths of your colleagues clearly affected you deeply. We've arranged for continued psychological care." "Fuck your psychological care. I know what I saw. They're intelligent. They're dangerous. There are people living near that forest who need to know." "Mr. Douglas," the deputy interrupted, "if you continue making these claims publicly, we'll have no choice but to pursue involuntary psychiatric commitment for evaluation. You're clearly experiencing a break from reality that could endanger yourself and others." The threat was clear. Tell the truth, be locked up as insane, accept their story, walk free. "The bodies," I said quietly. "Javier, Nora, Cole, what did you tell their families?" "Bear attack," Wolf said. "Tragedy, but these things happen in wilderness work. Their families receive the death benefits, full honors. We'd like to do the same for you. Survivor's benefits, full pay for the contract period, and comprehensive mental health support. All you need to do is sign the official incident report confirming the bear attack narrative." They slid a document across the table. I read it through, a complete fiction describing how a grizzly had attacked our camp, how we'd fled, how my 3 colleagues had been killed while I escaped. No mention of anything that actually happened. "And if I don't sign?" "Then we can't release you from the hospital," Wolf said. "Not until you're no longer a danger to yourself, which might be months, years, perhaps. Psychiatric evaluation is a complex process." I signed the document. What choice did I have? They released me 6 hours later with prescriptions for medications I never filled and referrals to therapists I never called. I went home to Seattle, to my apartment that suddenly felt like a cage. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Every shadow might be hiding something massive. Every sound in the night made me reach for weapons I didn't have. I requested all my original equipment back. My personal laptop, my backup drives with the footage, my field notes. The Forest Service claimed everything was lost in the attack. Convenient, but they hadn't found everything. Before leaving for Wendigo Ridge, I'd set up automatic cloud backup for my trail camera footage. Every night, any new video files uploaded to a private server I'd established for exactly this kind of data redundancy. The creatures had destroyed the local copies. The Forest Service had confiscated what they could find. But the cloud kept my secrets. I spent 3 weeks downloading and reviewing hundreds of hours of footage. Most showed nothing unusual. Deer, elk, the occasional bear. But 37 files showed them. The creatures. Bigfoot. Sasquatch. Whatever name couldn't diminish what they were. I compiled the clearest footage. The creature at the mineral lick. The two communicating with sign language. The one staring directly into the camera before destroying it. Evidence that couldn't be dismissed or rationalized. I uploaded it to every major platform. Reddit, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, sent it to news outlets, cryptozoology researchers, wildlife biologists. Flood the internet with truth so comprehensive it couldn't be suppressed. Within 48 hours, every upload was removed. Terms of service violations, copyright strikes, community guideline breaches. My accounts were suspended, then deleted. The emails bounced back. The news outlets never responded, but small pieces survived. Fragments re-uploaded by people who'd seen them first. Compressed, degraded copies circulating on conspiracy theory forums. Enough to make some people question, but never enough to prove anything conclusively. I tried going to the media directly. In-person meetings with journalists, bringing my backup drives. They'd listen politely, look at the footage, then explain how easily such things could be faked with modern CGI. How my recent psychiatric episode raised questions about reliability. How without corroboration they couldn't run a story that would destroy their credibility. One journalist, older guy named Marshall Fletcher, pulled me aside after officially declining the story. Off the record, I believe you. I've heard similar stories from 3 other sources over 20 years. But you can't win this. Whatever agency or organization is suppressing this information, they're better at it than we are at exposing it. You'll make yourself a target for no gain. My advice? Move somewhere urban. Stay away from forests. Live what life you can. I followed half his advice. I moved to Portland, surrounded myself with concrete and crowds, took a desk job analyzing wildlife data remotely. I haven't set foot in wilderness since. Can't. The thought of being surrounded by trees makes my chest constrict until I can't breathe. But I kept copies of everything, encrypted, distributed across multiple secure locations. And I kept researching. The pattern is there once you know what to look for. Every year, hundreds of people go missing in national parks and forests across North America. Most are never found. The official explanations vary. Lost hikers, bear attacks, accidental deaths, voluntary disappearances. But certain cases show consistencies. Multiple victims from same area. Witnesses reporting large bipedal figures. Evidence of unusual strength. Incidents near areas with indigenous legends about wild men. I created a map, plotted every disappearance that fit the pattern over the last 30 years. The clusters are unmistakable. Hundreds of cases that authorities refuse to connect, because connecting them would mean admitting what's out there. 3 months after my escape, I received a letter. No return address, postmarked from Coeur d'Alene. Inside was a single photograph. Me, leaving my apartment in Portland, taken from across the street. And a message, written in crude block letters. We know where they'd followed me. 1,000 miles from Wendigo Ridge, surrounded by a city of 500,000 people, and they'd found me. They wanted me to know. If they wished, they could take me anytime. I carry a pistol everywhere now. Stupid, right? If a 9-foot creature that can think and plan and coordinate with others of its kind wants me dead, a handgun won't help. But it makes me feel slightly less helpless. Last week, I saw movement in the trees of a small park near my building. Just a glimpse, something massive moving between the maples and firs, watching me before vanishing. It might have been nothing, might have been imagination. Might have been them, checking in, making sure I remember my place. It's been 14 months since Wendigo Ridge. I wake up screaming 3 or 4 times a week. The dreams are always the same. I'm back in the forest, running through darkness while voices call my name in that terrible broken English. Sometimes it's Javier's voice. Sometimes Nora's. Sometimes Cole's, though Cole never had time to be mimicked before they killed him. The doctors, the ones I finally agreed to see, have diagnoses. PTSD, survivor's guilt, paranoid delusions stemming from trauma-induced psychosis. They prescribe pills that I flush down the toilet. The pills make me slow, make me vulnerable. I need to stay alert. I've attempted to return to fieldwork twice. Both times I made it maybe 200 yards into forest before the panic attacks started. Hyperventilation, chest pain, complete sensory overload. Both times I ended up on my knees in the dirt, sobbing like a child while concerned hikers asked if I needed help. I can't go back. The wilderness is ruined for me. The place I spent my entire adult life working, the environment I loved and respected, now represents only death and terror. They took that from me as surely as they took my colleagues. But the worst part isn't the fear or the nightmares or the loss of my career. It's the knowledge I carry, the understanding of what's actually out there, watching from the tree line. We tell ourselves comfortable lies. Humans are the apex predators. We conquered nature. We're safe in our technology and civilization and weapons. These are stories we need to believe to function. The truth is, we're meat. We're slow, weak, vulnerable primates who dominate through numbers and tools, but remain fundamentally defenseless as individuals. And there are things in the deep wilderness, things we've relegated to mythology and folklore, that are stronger, faster, smarter in their element. Things that have watched us for generations, learning our languages, studying our weaknesses, occasionally reminding us of our proper place in the food chain. The evidence exists. The trail camera footage, the testimony of indigenous peoples who never stop believing, the patterns in the disappearances. But evidence means nothing when authorities refuse to acknowledge it. When there's an active suppression effort. When victims are dismissed as mentally ill or attention-seeking, I've accepted that I'll never convince anyone with authority or influence. The best I can do is tell my story, distribute it widely, and hope that maybe someone reads this before they plan their camping trip or accept that contract for remote wilderness work. Maybe you'll think twice before hiking alone in areas with Bigfoot legends. Maybe you'll take those indigenous warnings seriously instead of dismissing them as superstition. Maybe you'll notice when the forest goes silent, when the birds stop singing, when that overwhelming musky smell hits you from upwind. Maybe it'll save your life. I monitor reports obsessively now. Missing hikers, unexplained deaths, attacks attributed to bears or mountain lions. Last month, a family of 4 disappeared in the Cascade Range, experienced outdoors people who knew what they were doing. Search teams found shredded tents, destroyed equipment, massive footprints the official report described as bear tracks. The family was never recovered. 2 weeks ago, I found a post on a backpacking forum, someone describing impossible tree structures and weird howls in a remote area of Northern California. The poster said they felt watched, felt threatened, cut their trip short. The responses mocked them, suggested they'd been smoking too much weed, made Bigfoot jokes. I sent a private message. Trust your instincts. Don't go back. Tell anyone who'll listen not to go there. They responded, "You sound crazy." Maybe I am. Maybe 14 months of paranoia and isolation have broken something in me that can't be fixed. But I was sane at Wendigo Ridge. I was trained, experienced, rational. And I watched 3 people die because we didn't take the warning seriously. Because we thought we knew better than the locals and the legends and the people who'd lived in those forests for millennia. The creatures are real. They're intelligent enough to understand and mimic human language. They're organized enough to coordinate complex hunts. They're skilled enough to suppress evidence and avoid scientific documentation. And they're territorial enough to systematically eliminate humans who intrude on their ranges. The government knows. The Forest Service knows. Probably the military knows. They've known for decades, maybe centuries, and they've made the calculated decision that suppressing the truth costs less than the panic and economic damage that would follow public acknowledgement. Think about it economically. National parks generate billions in revenue. Logging, mining, recreation industries, all dependent on public belief that forests are safe, controlled environments. Admit that there are undocumented apex predators that occasionally kill humans, and that entire economy collapses. Better to classify a few dozen deaths per year as bear attacks or tragic accidents. Better to suppress evidence and discredit witnesses. The cost-benefit analysis is clear. I can't prove any of this. That's the brilliance of it. Every claim I make can be dismissed as paranoid fantasy. Every piece of evidence has been confiscated or deleted. Every witness has been either killed or, like me, threatened into silence. But I'm tired of being silent. I'm tired of watching the missing persons reports pile up while authorities lie about what's taking them. So here's my final testimony. Everything I witnessed, as detailed and honest as I can make it. Believe it or not, I can't control that. Just know that if you go into deep wilderness, the old-growth forests, the remote mountain ranges, the areas with indigenous warnings and local legends, you're entering someone else's territory. Someone who was there first and who views you as an intruder. Someone who can think, plan, communicate, and kill with terrifying efficiency. The creatures at Wendigo Ridge let me go. I'm certain of that now. They could have taken me during any of the days they stalked us, could have killed me when they took coal. They chose to let me survive, chose to let me spread the story, the fear, the warning, because fear serves their purpose. Fear keeps people away from their territories. Fear protects their populations from discovery. I'm their messenger, whether I want to be or not. So here's the message. Stay out of the deep woods. Don't trust the silence. Don't ignore the warnings. And if you see massive footprints, smell that overwhelming musk, hear sounds that don't match any known animal, don't investigate. Don't document. Don't try to make contact. Run. Get to civilization. Don't look back. Because if they learn your name, if they decide you're a threat or a lesson or simply interesting prey, you'll end up like Javier, like Nora, like Cole, like the hundreds of others whose disappearances are filed as accidents and forgotten. I still have the memory card they placed in Nora's hand. I've never watched it. Can't. But I keep it in a safety deposit box with copies of all my evidence, with instructions that if anything happens to me, if I disappear or die under suspicious circumstances, it should be released publicly. Maybe that'll be enough. Maybe my death will accomplish what my survival couldn't. Maybe they know that, and it's why they haven't killed me yet. Or maybe they're just waiting, letting me suffer with the knowledge, letting the fear do its work, demonstrating their complete control over my life. I don't know which is worse. What I do know is this. There are places humans shouldn't go, territories that aren't ours, apex predators that never stop being apex despite our technological advances. And they're still out there, in the deep wilderness, watching the edges of civilization, waiting for the next person who doesn't take the warning seriously, waiting to teach the next lesson. Don't be that person, please. God, please don't be that person. The forest isn't what you think it is, and what watches from the tree line is so much worse than anything your imagination can conjure. I learned that at Wendigo Ridge. Learned it at a cost I'm still paying. Learn from my mistakes. Learn from their victims. Stay away from the deep woods. Garrett Douglas currently lives in Portland, Oregon. He no longer works in wildlife management. If you have information about Wendigo Ridge or similar incidents, he asks that you not contact him. There's nothing he can do with the information. And he's trying to move forward with what life remains. The creatures are still there. They'll always be there. That's what we need to understand. They were here first, and they're patient.